So to test the alternator, the car does have to be running, so we can go ahead and charge the battery up enough to get the car to start and run for a little while. We always want to check the alternator from the alternator post. Right under this boot, you'll see a nut right there. That's where we want to put our positive lead from our multimeter on there while the car's running to our negative on the battery. That's going to give us the best results as far as testing the alternator. You can just test the battery post to see if you're getting enough juice. You'll notice that, oh, we're down maybe 10 volts. I think that's what this is charging at the moment, 10 volts from the alternator. But if you go just from the battery, you don't know if it's a cable issue in between the alternator and the battery. So that's why it's always important to go directly from the alternator, testing at this post, to the battery on the negative side. So this will be a positive, that'll be our negative. That's on any car. If you have access to this, that's the best way. So go ahead, start the car just to show you the results of a bad alternator. So I have my little battery tester on right now, and you can see at the battery post, I'm just hooked up to the battery. We're at 9.5-ish. Sometimes it goes up to 10, but right around 9.5. So that's that. So we know that only 9.5 volts is getting to our battery. Is it a cable issue or is it the alternator? So that's why we want to check at the alternator. Let me hook that up real quick. So now I'm hooked up to the alternator there, and then the battery here. And then you can see right now, so it drops some as the car's warmed up. We're about 8 volts. So now we know that it is the alternator itself, not a cable issue. So if we were getting our 14 volts right now, then we know that it's not the alternator, but an issue in between the alternator and the battery. But this is a bad alternator, so now let's run through the process of changing it. I want to start by removing the belt. It's a 14mm bolt. The auto tensioner is right by the power steering pump. Move it clockwise. It'll loosen the belt. We can pull it off the power steering pump or the alternator, whichever pulley you can get on. There we go. We just move this out of the way. You don't have to take it completely out of the vehicle. Then we want to remove the power steering pump bolts. There's 2 of them, one here, one diagonal from that. We don't want to disconnect any of the hoses. We're just getting it so we can move it out of the way as needed. All right, and just so you can be able to move it like this. So let me pull you around to the alternator. So on the alternator, we have this green plug, disconnect, and then this cable here under that boot that we were testing on. It's a 10mm. Ratcheting wrench works the best for you, or you can just use a regular wrench. It's hard to get a socket on there. There we go. That can get pulled out of the way. So now from this point, it's just 3 12mm bolts, 1 on top, 2 on the bottom. Pull those off and the alternator can come up. All right, so now we just pull it up, move this out of the way. Should squeeze right in between. There we go. So putting the new alternator in is easier than taking the old one out. And drop it in. Long one goes on top if you forget. The torque on the alternator bolts are 16 foot-pounds. Power steering pump back on. And these are 16 foot-pounds as well. And now we're ready to put the belt back on. And now we want to bolt on our cable and plug in our green connector. You just want that good and snug. It doesn't have to be crazy tight. And I pulled this little bracket off the old one. That's just for the wiring harness. Should have put that on first before putting the alternator on, but if you forget like I did, it's not too late. Plug that back in. All right, we'll plug the battery back in and we are ready to start this up. And then we'll just double check, just like we did before, make sure this new alternator is charging properly. Check from here to the battery, and then we'll clamp both battery posts and just double check that as well. All right, so just like at the beginning, I got the positive on that post, negative on the battery, and we are 14.47, so that's right where we want to be. Then we could take this, hook it to our positive on our battery, just to make sure that that 14 is getting to the battery as well. 14.3, it's perfect. So now our battery's charging like it should. So this battery was low as like 11 point something volts. We're gonna go ahead and let the alternator charge it up, and then we'll do a battery test just to make sure that the alternator didn't take out this battery, and if the battery's bad, we'll go ahead and replace that as well. The last thing we need to do, because we had the battery disconnect, we need to put in our radio security code. Now, if you're fortunate, in the glove box, right there is a sticker with the code on it. If you don't see that code, what you'll have to do is go online, Google Honda radio code, and go to the Honda website. They'll have information that you fill out and they'll give you your code. If for some reason that doesn't work, then you can call the dealer and they can help you out that way. But typically it's in the glove box. If it's not online, usually is the next step, and then the dealer's last resort.